All right, so this is normally a 21-hour training, and this is the training that all of the licensed parents in Florida get. Okay, so they have to come for 21 hours of training, and because you guys are under Place of Hope, you're not licensed foster parents, then this 21 hours is not required of you. However, there's a lot of really helpful stuff that is in there since you really are foster parents, right? You really are doing the foster parents thing. So we try to cover all the stuff that is applicable to you. Mary probably told you, but Travis and I were house parents there on campus for about 8 years. And then we continued to be traditional foster parents in our own home for about 5 more years. And then we adopted the last foster child that we adopted him, and he was number 5. So we then closed our home as a foster home. So we spent about 13 years being foster parents. But now I have for all of these years done all the training for the traditional foster parents. But hopefully there'll be a couple things in here that you guys will learn either about foster care in Florida or just being house parents. But we'll start on that first chapter.
I do have a question already.
You have questions already? Yeah, go ahead.
You said because we're, whatever the phrase was used about Place of Hope versus traditional foster parent, but we're supposed to be doing this because we're going to be licensed ourselves, not Place of Hope.
Okay, I know they were changing that. They're changing that to making sure that the foster parents are licensed foster parents. So if that is the case, then I would assume that you're going to have to take the 21-hour training and not the shortened training, unless because of COVID or something, they have some permissions that they've granted for you to not meet the general requirement. But the general requirement is a 21-hour class, which we would not do on a one-on-one basis. Of course, it just wouldn't make sense. We'd do a whole group of you if you were all meeting that to be actually licensed. So I don't know the answer to that, but ask your case coordinator or Gina or somebody what that would look like if you then have to take the whole thing.
Right.
All right, so we're going to start on page 6. In Florida, the way it works, that children come into care because someone has called the abuse hotline, which is 1-800-96-ABUSE. And of course, if any of us see or even suspect abuse, then we would call the abuse hotline to report that. And if you hold certain jobs in the community, then you actually by law have to call the abuse hotline. So anybody in social services or the medical field or the church world or the school world or therapy, if you suspect or know that a child is being abused, abandoned, or neglected, then you have to by law call and report your suspicions. And then the hotline takes that call and they figure out, is there enough evidence here? Is this concerning? If they feel like it is, they'll send an investigator out to investigate what it is that the allegation is. And then if they can find evidence that there is something going on, then of course they try to put services in place to prevent removal of a child from the home. So they may do a parenting class. They may put the kids in a daycare because mom is sleeping because she works at night or whatever the need is. But they will sort that out and investigate whatever those allegations are. But if they go out to investigate and of course find evidence that they feel like there's some evidence saying, this child is abused or neglected, and so much so that it's not safe for them to stay in this environment, that's when they make a decision to remove the child from their home. They immediately then would ask if there's any relatives or friends willing to take that child. So if the family can say, yes, my mom or my sister or my neighbor or my somebody, then the state will immediately look into doing a relative or a non-relative home study to quickly try to put that child into someone that they know's home. If that is not possible, or if there is no options, or the people that were options didn't pass the home study, that's when they turn to the pool of licensed foster homes or to organizations like Place of Hope, and then get the child into one of those homes that have been trained and prepared and licensed and are ready at a moment's notice to take a child into care. But that's how the process of how they get from someone suspecting abuse to actually placed into a licensed home. Of course, there's lots of different types of child abuse: physical abuse, neglect, abandonment, substance abuse, sexual abuse. Probably the number one thing that we see is substance abuse and substance abuse related neglect or substance abuse related abuse here in Florida in this area for sure. There's a ton of that, and that's what we see kids being removed and coming into care for. So turn page. This talks about removed. I don't know if you guys have seen the removed video. So an organization put together a little video to kind of give people a visual of what it must be like to be a foster child. And so there's removed and removed part 2 and 3 now. I think they're on the 3rd part, but just go to YouTube and type in removed and it pops up. It's the first thing. It's a pretty popular video, but it really is a good way of just kind of putting yourself and seeing a visual of what that might look like. So they are constantly changing the programs, as you guys know. So what house parenting has always been, the requirements for that may be different now moving forward with Place of Hope. And that's something you guys are going to investigate. But the requirements are all the way to page 9, the obligations or responsibilities that we have to the foster children, whether you're a house parent or you're a traditional foster parent, are all very similar. Of course, we are committed to the safety and discipline of the children, our commitment. We're not looking for just people that as long as we're comfortable, yeah, this is a great thing, but we're looking for families who can say, regardless of how challenging it is, regardless of the issues that the kids bring us, we are committed to walking through all of that with the kids because we recognize that they need someone that is just committed and patient and faithful to having a relationship with them. So, of course, their well-being and clean home environment. We're responsible for their health care and medications, and I'm sure you've probably done other trainings where you know you're responsible to take them to their well visits just like any parent would do. And then if they are prescribed medication, you have to follow the doctor's prescription of medication and document it. It's not the same as if that child was born to you, where you might take the kid to the doctor and they prescribed them an antibiotic, but then the next morning you felt like they were, you never started the antibiotic and they were better. You would have the right to say, oh, you know what, I'm not even going to start them because they really turned a corner and I feel like, they're better. Whereas if you have been prescribed something for your foster child, you have to follow what that doctor's recommendations would be for that child. When it starts, when it stops, any changes that you make, just make sure that you are very careful about following that because if the doctor has ordered, if you disagree or you think something's changed, of course you would take them back in to be seen again. So it's a little bit different. I try to help my foster parents by saying, think about if you were a daycare provider rather than, because we think of ourselves as mom and dad, but yet the rights of this child belong to their parent when they're in foster care. So the parent still has the rights to the child. So that means their decision, they have decision making. And then of course, because the courts have sheltered that child or they have made them a dependent of the state, the courts have legal decision-making processes, but we as foster parents do not. We do not have any legal decision-making abilities as that when that child is in our foster home. Of course, if we would adopt that child becomes ours as if they were born to us. So that changes everything, and it goes back to we would have full authority without any input or other voices. But definitely, even as year after year goes on, you start feeling like you're the child's parents, but it is a different scenario, and we constantly have to keep in mind that we have to honor the parents' rights to that child and what their wishes are, and also of course the state who is legally responsible for them. So we're also responsible for connections to their birth family, normalcy, allowing them just to have normalcy in their childhood, their education, communication with all the teachers, advocating for them. So because we know them the best, we spend the most time with them, then we are the ones that the communication is so important, that we're communicating, hey, here's how the child's doing, here's what they're struggling with, and communicating that and advocating for what we feel like and see that they need. Of course, giving them good food and nutrition and helping them connect to religious or ethnic heritage should they have a connection. Okay, so the next page shows us all the different people that are involved in the child's life, and this is something as foster parents you get to know really well, where you have a whole team. It's not just you caring for the child, but it's this whole team of people that aren't necessarily connected to each other, but yet all connected to the child. So I remember Travis and I, we had, of course, in the house 6 kids, and then each one of those kids has this many people, and I think we counted like 80 some people one time that we were communicating with and had connection with the kids. By the time you talk about their teachers and their therapists and their doctors and their guardian ad litems and their case managers and all of the people for each one of them, especially if they're not a sibling group, they all have a different one. So there's a lot of people that surround each child that we are working in partnership with. So getting to know who those people are, making sure that if we meet them, we get their name and their contact information immediately, because you're going to be like, now who is this? And they didn't leave their card and I don't know how. So all of that is really important, that we stay super connected to who all that is. The next couple pages talk about those people. And I don't know the state that you came from, how it worked, but in Florida, there is someone assigned to the child that's called a guardian ad litem. So that's a volunteer in the community who goes through the guardian ad litem program and takes this training, but then they just advocate for the child, build a relationship with them. And then when there's court, they go into court and say, this is what I've seen. This is how I feel the child is happening. This is what I feel like the child needs. And so they're just this neutral party. Every child should have, they don't always, but should have a guardian ad litem that is there to advocate and build a relationship, and then speak up in court for what they think is best for that child in the case. And then of course the DCM, the dependency case manager, or the case manager, or the DCF worker, they go by all of those names. But typically we refer to them as the case manager, or the DCM, dependency case manager. That is the person that's kind of the lead on this team. They're the ones that are responsible for coming to visit the child in their home, in your home, every 28 days. So not once a month, but really it's supposed to be every 25 to give themselves a little leeway. But every 25 days, sometime in that 25-day period, they should be coming, talking to the child, speaking to them without you around, looking around your home, signing in on your sign-in sheet in your home, all of those things. Having you sign something, or the child, if they're old enough, sign something that says that they've been there. But those are all the normal responsibilities of a case manager should make to your home, because they are responsible for making sure that that child is safe in your home. And then also all the services that that child needs will be delivered to them.
Question about the access to the home on the private side, our quarters, is that also accessible to the case managers?
No, I mean, I guess it could be. That would probably be a better question for your case coordinator, but I never had one care or come into our apartment little area there in the home. But if they had a concern, or they wanted to, then I would say that yes, that would be part of their responsibility. But again, they're usually focused on the child, what's going on with the child more so.
And Jenny, we've not been foster parents before in Michigan, where we came from. So whatever that's worth when you're asking.
Yeah.
Probably don't. I was a nanny for a foster family for about 18 months.
Okay.
So that's the extent of our knowledge of how that might have worked well or not well.
Yes. Okay. So a nanny for a foster family. That's what I
medical.
All those years. Medical.
Medical.
Well, that I'm sure was a huge blessing and help to them. But yes, it is a whole different experience when you're foster parents for the first time, for sure. So the next couple pages, starting on 14 and 15, start introducing you to the dependency legal system. And the goal, then it's important to understand that the goal of the Department of Children and Families, that's DCF, and I think we talked briefly last time through our very frozen Zoom meeting, how DCF, that's the government agency responsible, but in Florida it's privatized. So they contract with ChildNet to be the lead agency in Palm Beach County who's responsible for all the child welfare. Then ChildNet subcontracts down to Place of Hope to do training, recruitment, licensing to do Place of Hope, the group care, the maternity, all of that stuff is all contracted through DCF, then ChildNet, and then have a contract to them. So we submit home studies and submit contracts and stuff back and forth through them, but the requirements are the same for everybody, so, but because it's privatized, it allows Place of Hope as a faith-based agency to do all of our work that has all the same requirements, but from a faith-based perspective. So it's really great. But the goal of DCF is to provide safety, permanency, and well-being of the child. Okay, so they want the children to be in a permanent place. Of course, foster care is not a permanent place, because the goal of foster care is to reunify children back into their families if possible. They need to know that the children are safe, and where they are should be a place that they can stay. They're not looking for the smartest parents. Okay, are the foster parents smarter or the biological? They're not looking for who's wealthier. They're not looking for who can give the child more opportunities. They are simply trying to make sure that a child in their environment is safe, right? And so that's a little bit hard for us as foster parents sometimes to wrap our mind around, because we're like, look at all the requirements that we have, look at all the opportunities, and we're going to reunify a child back into a home where, you know, we're going to be lucky if they just give them a meal once in a while, you know. So it's really hard for us to feel like, you know, we can give the child so much, and why don't they consider that the mom never changes their diapers on a visit, and she never, you know. So all of these things become big things to us when we're foster parents. But remembering that the goal is simply safety and permanency for the child in that home, and that's what they're trying to reach, not an ideal living situation. Okay, so Florida Statute Chapter 39 on page 15 provides the legal framework for all the rules and all the policies and all the procedures of everything we do. Every I you have to dot and T, and every paperwork you fill out is because Florida Statute Chapter 39 lays all that out for what is required of us. It also makes sure that parental rights are constitutional rights. Okay, so that is a constitutional right to their child. It can only be terminated if there is clear and convincing evidence, which is the highest standard of proof, that all reasonable efforts have been made to reunify the child with their parent. So the reason why the foster care process, you know, you think, why are kids lingering in foster care? That's kind of a big question that a lot of people wonder. Well, the reason is because the parental rights are constitutional rights, and they have to do every reasonable thing to try to maintain that parent's rights to parent their child. And so if a case manager doesn't do the job thoroughly, if a case manager doesn't document, if the attorneys don't feel like they have clear and convincing evidence of abandonment or neglect or abuse, then they can't prove that with clear and convincing evidence in court to terminate or TPR a parent, which is what frees a child to be adopted by another family. So all of that just to understand that the number one goal, what we're always looking for, is to reunify families and make reasonable efforts for reunification to happen. Now, in a lot of our group homes, there's a lot of kids who aren't getting reunified. You know, their goal has already been changed to another APLA, we call it another planned permanent living, another planned permanent living arrangement. Sorry, I knew all those. But that is their goal, is to age out of foster care. So not every kid that we have, because they're already so far down the road, is trying to reunify. But the goal in general of foster care is definitely reunification. And of course, they're always looking for a relative or someone that the child knows first. If they can't find that, that's when they turn to really a traditional foster home. And then typically in the past anyway, then they have turned to, you know, a group environment. The kids that aren't doing well or wouldn't do well in a traditional home, but maybe would do better with 2 full-time people who that is your role. So go ahead.
Is there an age, I'm thinking 16, 17 or something, where a child might be, I guess, emancipated rather than go back to the parents that maybe the judge think they should, but the kid is refusing to go, saying, I can't.
Yeah, once they get to the teenage years, the judge will listen to what the child wants rather than forcing a 16-year-old to be back home. Usually I haven't seen them emancipate the child, but they'll allow them to stay in, you know, in their foster care environment, or make a choice as to what, you know, would happen. But you typically don't see a lot of parents fighting to get their teenagers back. That's just isn't happening. If they've reached that point, it's because they've grown up in foster care, or because the parents aren't interested in parenting them on some level. But I haven't seen a lot of teenagers going through that reunification process, if that answers the question. Of course, so many efforts are made to assist the parents in all of this, because that is their right. That is the foundation of all of that. Page 16 talks about how we think that the most important attributes a foster parent can possess, of course, at Place of Hope, we feel like the most important attribute is a love for God and, a passion to share Jesus with the children. But after that, patience and compassion are very important attributes for foster parents. Patience with the kids, patience with the situations, patience with the system, patience with the people we're working with, and compassion, understanding why people are making the decisions that they are rather than having unrealistic expectations. We're just patient and compassionate with everybody that we meet. So with the kids, with their parents, with case management. So it goes through and talks a lot about that. And then the last page in that first chapter is the dependency case management flow chart, which is really helpful because it shows you exactly legally what happens when a child is removed and what petitions are filed, when the next court date is. It's super confusing, but this at least gives you a visual of what happens next. So at the end of every one of these chapters, there's a little quiz. So we'll go over those to make sure that we've covered the primary points of each chapter. So number 1 on the quiz, which is page 17, the primary goal of foster care is reunification. True, right? The dependency legal system is a long and complex process because parental rights are constitutional rights and not easily terminated. Also true. Case managers are required to visit the foster child in your home every 25 days and conduct unannounced visits quarterly. Also true. As long as you're providing a bed and regular meals, you've done your job as a foster parent. That's false. There's so much more, so much more emotion and planning and intentionality. Foster parents are required to take their foster children to their medical and dental visits. Also true. Okay, you guys graduated from chapter 1, right? Okay, so chapter 2, you can see in those first couple pages where there is some stories of the kids that you can follow through, but we want to talk just a little bit about trauma because trauma is so foundational for us to understand because we know that every child that comes into our home has trauma. They have experienced trauma in their home or they would not be in the position where they are. So the trauma of abuse or neglect that has happened to them in their home, then the abuse or the trauma of being removed from their home. If you can imagine, you guys have kids, right? You have a couple kids. So if you can imagine at any point someone coming in and saying, I am removing your children from you and they're going to go stay with someone else, the trauma that act alone, regardless of if you are perfect parents or terrible parents leading up to that point, the trauma of removing a child from their parents is very deep and very significant. And then of course, just the trauma of being with strangers and everything changing and the loss of everything, so everything that they're connected to is then lost. So when a child feels, of course, intensely threatened, they may develop what they call CTS or child traumatic stress. Any of those things that have happened to them could cause that. Every child responds differently. If it was an ongoing thing, if this was a one-time thing, if the abuser was mom, if the abuser was somebody they don't know, all of these things factor into how the trauma affects the child. But let's flip all the way over to page 14. But trauma has profound effects on the child's physical health and psychological development, especially in these 5 areas. There's a little check mark there beside these 5 areas. So they really struggle to trust other people because of that traumatic experience. Feeling safe, regardless of if they are safe in your home, they often don't feel safe. So I remember a lot of times when our kids moved in, they were extremely fearful of darkness. They're extremely fearful of other people. They're extremely fearful of us, all of anything. They're extremely just fearful. And of course, fear plays out in childhood, sometimes like excitability, like bouncing off the walls, sometimes like defiance, sometimes like crying, sometimes like hiding. In so many different ways, fear can play out in a child's behavior, but usually they don't come to you and say, I'm really feeling insecure and unsafe and fearful here, right? But they will tell you by the way they act, screaming at bedtime, night terrors, all of the behaviors are communicating to you what's going on with them, not so much their words. So they also are struggling to understand and manage their emotions, adjust and respond to life's changes, and physically and emotionally adapt to stress. So kind of our language is having meltdowns, but we see a lot of kids, regardless of if they're 6 months old or they're 16 years old, having emotional meltdowns. And maybe we saw something that triggered it. Maybe it was a trigger that we have no idea what just happened. I just said, put your shoes on. And all of a sudden someone's over there, on the ground, melting down or throwing a massive a massive fit. And a big part of that is linked to trauma. Different parts of their brain form or don't form, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But trauma triggers can happen at any moment, and they don't respond in ways that we expect them to respond. And sometimes that can be linked to trauma, but of course every child is different. So we can't really prepare for how to deal with trauma in a 3-year-old because it can look completely different for every single child. There's these response factors that I just went over that are in that green box that you can look at, but they may avoid, they may just have huge emotions. They may just distance themselves. Things can cause them to re-experience earlier traumatic experiences. So maybe bath time triggers a memory of something bad. And so they're scared to death of bath time. Maybe it's steps. Maybe it's the kitchen. Maybe, there could just be a million different things that cause fear to play out in their behaviors. But trauma also affects, then on page 15, they have trouble learning a lot of times. So that's why you may have a 3rd grader who hasn't learned to read. You may have, all of these different learning challenges, because when a child is in a fear-filled environment, they can't focus on learning. They can't focus on meeting milestones. They are focused on survival. So when there's survival behavior, they're just focused on where am I going to steal food from next. They're not thinking the cute little ABC song. And then of course that puts them further and further behind in their learning and their academics, the more time that they've spent in an environment that is not safe and secure. Sleep problems are also very common regardless of the age, moodiness, and not acting their age. So one thing that Travis and I would always try to do is identify where the child is developmentally. So where are they emotionally and developmentally, and then we would parent them as such. So we may have a 14-year-old boy move into our home, but as we would get to know Nick, we would say, so how old do you think Nick is developmentally? Well, he struggles with this and he struggles with that and he's on this level. And so I would say he's probably about 8, and so we would treat Nick like he was 8, not like he was 14. So expectation wise, I would expect him to do 8-year-old chores. I would expect him to have 8-year-old emotional responses. I would expect him to have where he was rather than where he is chronologically. Because if I expected him to act like a 14-year-old, he would never, ever, ever be able to meet any of my expectations, which would then just frustrate him. So it's so important that we have expectations of the kids, but yet they're reasonable and it's where they are, so that we can help them meet the milestones that they naturally need to meet, rather than jumping. They can't jump from here to here. They have to go through the progression, and that takes time, and they can't even start to do that until they feel safe and they feel loved and they feel comfortable. So our first focus is safety, and then we can start working on, okay, hey, you need to learn how to read. You need how to learn basic self-control, like fold your hands and actually keep them on your lap for 30 seconds, or wherever we have to start, that's where we start. So they may act out the trauma they experienced in their play. They may not. It really depends on the child. We may know the story of the trauma. We may never know the story, but we still see the behaviors and we still see the child. So it's so important that we don't think that the child's life begins the day they move in with us, because it doesn't. Okay, so they're bringing their whole story with them, and we're helping them take that whole story and make sense of it, and bring healing to it and bring safety into it. So we're not trying to say, okay, clean slate today. There's never a clean slate today. That's not how it works for any of us. I can't take one of you and move you to a new family and a new scenario and say, hey, okay, clean slate for you. You're the new dad in this family. Nothing that's happened before matters. You can't do that. Not only would you not want to do that, but it's not even possible, right? But I think sometimes we're tempted, because they're children, to be, okay, clean slate, your life starts now. And that's just not true. So having the mindset of, how can I help understand where they've been, and then help them understand where they've been, because that's going to help us know what we need to work on and where we're going from here, and how to make sense of that, and how it affects here, and how God's going to use it in the future. So we're putting together that whole story. So page 16 helps us understand a little bit how the brain develops. Those early years, as parents, you guys know that the first 2 years of life are absolutely crucial in brain development and attachment. all the things that we do, feeding them regularly, responding to their emotional cues, holding them constantly. I know that's why God made babies not walk, because he knew they needed to be held for long periods of time for that emotional connectedness and that attachment and that relational connection that happens in those first couple years of life. But for a lot of our kids, they didn't have that. Those first years of life, they were left alone. They weren't responded to when they were hungry. All of the things that should have happened didn't happen. And that has affected their brains. If you look at the scan of a child who was neglected and a healthy child, their brains, you'll see a difference. One is active and you see synapses going back and forth. Another one, you'll see dark black spots because there was no stimulation to cause brain development. So every time we pick up our baby and we touch their skin and we look in their eyes and we coo and we use the little mom voice, or we bounce them up and down if they're fussy, every one of those things causes the brain to develop. If a baby's laying in their crib or in their rocker or in their car seat, their brain's just doing nothing. Okay, so the only thing they're thinking is, I'm hungry, nobody's meeting me, I can't trust anybody to meet my needs, and then that's it. There's nothing else that's going on. So then they get removed and they're put into a foster home or another environment. They don't even know what to do with all the stimulation. And when someone holds them and wants to cuddle them, and they pull back. They don't want that because that's so foreign to them, which then perpetuates the problem. So it's so important that as foster parents, we recognize the significance of attachment in early life and brain development. And then whatever age they come to us, our focus is on, okay, we know what causes the brain to develop and make those connections. So we're implementing that in the child's life, regardless of their age. If they're 2, we're holding them constantly. We're probably even carrying them around in a little carrier like they're a newborn. If they're 10, we're doing tons of interactive games and singing and playing outside. We're definitely not sitting them in front of TV because that's a blank mind activity. So we're doing all of the things that cause brain development because they got a lot of catching up to do, right? And so we know the senses all cause brain development. Attachment causes brain development. Although it is your capacity, brain capacity, is there at birth. The connections that are made are all environmental as well. So we can keep making a lot of progress in a child's brain throughout their childhood, although yes, the biggest years are those first couple years. But we know that the most important things on page 18 to help with brain development, which will then help with, of course, the brain is the boss, right? So brain development helps with behavior. So we're not just managing behaviors, we're healing the brain. We're helping the brain to grow and develop, which will then affect the behaviors. But they give you the 4 things there in bold. Nutritious food, so important. Safe, affectionate, loving touch. And we have to remember they're not getting safe, affectionate, loving touch anywhere else, right? Teachers aren't hugging them. Coaches aren't allowed to touch. There's so much, especially now, God bless the children now, where no one's touching each other. But that is so important that we find ways to give safe, affectionate, loving touch because humans need that. And our kids are only getting that from us as their foster parents in this season. But it truly and greatly affects their brain development. An environment of safety, so whatever it is that makes them feel safe, not just is safe, but makes them feel safe. So, I remember with our boys, we would show them, look, if you open the window, the alarm goes off. You're safe. No one can get in here. Look, we checked your closets when we put you to bed. There's no one in here and no one can get in here without me knowing. So whatever, I remember talking to a little boy who his foster parents told him the walls of their house were so thick that his mom couldn't get in to get him. So it seems crazy, but what she was smart enough to recognize is that he needed to feel safe. So it wasn't just enough to be like, you're fine, you're safe, you're good here. That wasn't enough. They needed to actually feel that and us be intentional in making sure that they're there. And then appropriate physical activity, okay, right? That's true of all kids, but especially if we want their brain to try to catch up, is they need new experiences. So we're going to different parks, we're playing different games, we're learning different games, and we're doing all the things that are new and different because that helps the brain actually take on more and cause more brain development. So the next couple pages talk about key developmental tasks and then how trauma impacts them. So you guys can read through that. And then the emotional regulatory healing is just saying we can't give our kids what we don't have. So we as the parents need to make sure that we are in a place of we have been healed from hurt and trauma that has happened to us, so that we can model that for them, so that we can show that to them rather than their trauma causing us trauma. I remember one of the traditional foster parents that I worked with, she took a child in the trauma that little girl had experienced very much resembled what she had experienced as a child, and it caused all that loss and all that grief and all that emotions to come back up for mom. And she immediately went back to her therapist, and she had to walk through all of what she had already done because she didn't realize how much it would cause her to re-experience all the trauma that she had already been through and walk through a lot of healing in. So we have to recognize, is this something that's triggering something in my own healing or my own emotions that I need to deal with, because I don't want to misplace or displace that onto the child. I don't want my experience to affect the emotional calm and confidence that I am leading them through. And of course, we know that God is our healer, and we're constantly speaking the truth of his word and his healing and how it has healed us and how he promises to bring that into their life as well. Page 22 is great because it just sums up all of us, our trauma sensitive parenting. So we are not just parenting, but we're parenting from a trauma sensitive perspective. And so this is what we're focused on: feeling of safety. You guys got that. Helping them manage their emotions, identify and modify behaviors that need changed, supporting their connections and relationships. And that goes back to their life did not start right here. Maybe there's a grandma who they love dearly, who they need to have that connection to. Maybe we could get, visits set up where they could spend time with grandma. Help a child develop a strong sense of self. I remember one of our teenage boys, all the boys loved football except for one of them. And he was not good at football. He didn't love football. And he really struggled until he found a sport, cross country, that he was really good at. And then so many behaviors and so much school issues changed when he found something that he felt confident in. And it wasn't the same as the next kid. It couldn't be, but it really changed for him. And so it's so important that we help them find something that they can excel in or that they love to do, just like all of us, that gives us confidence in who we are and what our abilities are. Of course, advocating for them and then constantly looking at our own responses so that we are changing how we respond to best meet the needs of the child. All right, so trauma, this is an area, trauma and attachment are the two areas that I say definitely learn more about if you have not been a foster parent before, because I could have never imagined the depth of how trauma affected children. I came from a very loving, healthy home, and I literally had just not seen just the emotion, the raw emotions, the hurt, the pain, the anger that came from our hurting teenage boy was completely shocking to me. I had never seen it, never even imagined it. So the depth of that was just so much deeper than I could even wrap my mind around, even as an educated adult. So that it's just until you've seen it, until you live with it, and everybody, and if you've been a teacher, you've been a babysitter, great experiences, but it's not the same. It's not the same as parenting.
Good or bad, for what it's worth, we actually have a daughter from Romania who's rad, so we have lived it.
And you guys are way down the road. Yes, that's awesome. I spent some time in Romania. I love Romania. I love that. So you guys, how old was she when you adopted her?
Almost 3.
Okay, so you guys know that it's not the same. If you've been to Romania, it's not the same as adopting a child from Romania, right? I understand. But how old is she now?
21.
21. Okay, how's she doing?
Up until the last 6 months, it was hell. She's turned a corner, and I think she's starting to come around.
Yay, that's good. I know.
I don't want to get too excited because it's been a rough 18 years, but we've seen more hope in the last 6 months. We finally have, she's also lower IQ.
Mm-hmm.
So we asked her finally, what's happened 6 months ago that you're starting to care and whatever all. And she said, I don't know. So I don't know.
I think so much once they can see from an adult perspective, it changes, because when you're a child, you think like a child. You know, this is biblical. When we're an adult, we think differently, spiritually, physically. And so hopefully, you know, as an adult, when she can start putting into perspective and seeing, you know, you guys and your life and her experiences, she can put them into perspective that will allow healing to happen, you know, in her life. But yes, until you know what it's like to parent a kid. And we did talk about RAD, which I'll, you know, I won't spend a lot of time on that because you guys are probably far more educated than I am on that, but that's not an uncommon scenario for adoptive parents or for foster parents, of course, because those first couple years of their life so greatly affect how they see relationships that it's very challenging to undo what they have seen in those first couple of years.
What city in Romania did you go to?
We went to Kavasna.
No,
and we went to that's the city where we stayed. We were there for like a month, but we worked in an orphanage and stayed there in Kavasna. But such a beautiful place and a beautiful children. Okay, so page 31 is our quiz. Children who've experienced trauma often have a hard time trusting other people and feeling safe. Is that true? Trauma can make a child feel overwhelmed with feelings of fear, anger, shame, and helplessness. A foster parent can help them manage their emotions by providing a calm, consistent, and loving atmosphere. True. Creating an atmosphere of safety is critical for a child who's experienced trauma. True. Symptoms like trouble learning, sleep problems, lack of focus, or moodiness can actually be a response to trauma rather than ADHD. And that is true too, right? So we saw that a lot. When a child moves in, you know, everybody's like, that kid is ADHD. They are bouncing off the walls. But once we put that structure in place, there are kids who really do struggle with ADHD, but there are lots of other ones who just, once they get that structure and that consistency and those expectations put into their daily routine, all that fear subsides, which allows them to just calm down and be able to be just fine. A child's brain can never heal from trauma. That one obviously is false, right? There is healing that is possible, but it doesn't happen just because we want it to. It requires a lot of intentionality on our part to put things into place that will cause their brain to heal. Okay, so the next chapter is partnerships. So we talked a little bit about that, but it's so important that we communicate with the partners. The best way to communicate is email. So that way you can communicate with multiple people at once. It's all time-stamped. If you didn't get a response, you can go back and send that same email. It's so much better. I know we're always tempted to text, but when it relates to something that we need, service we need, a meeting we need, something we need, email is definitely the best, because you can email the case manager, you can include your place of hope. They change the names of what they call it all the time. So whatever, your case coordinator or whatever, the guardian ad litem, and say, hey, we think that Johnny needs therapy. He's really frustrated. He can't communicate to us. What's our next step in setting that up for Johnny? Okay, so then that's much better than texting, because, oh, I didn't see that text. Well, it was 5 weeks ago, you know? So it's so much better to communicate via email because of all of those reasons. But definitely, we're not along just for the ride, but we should be active partners that are communicating what the child needs. You guys have the added benefit of having a case coordinator who, she goes to court, she does a lot of the paperwork, she does a lot of communication with case management for you. But somebody is doing that, like on page 6, somebody is advocating and communicating and spending a lot of time doing that for the child. But fortunately for house parents, they do have someone that helps them with that. Page 11 then talks about a partnership plan. So this is what we're committed to as we're partnering for the child. We're respectful partners. We're professional partners. So we're not the crazy foster parents that flip out every time we disagree with something, right? We are professional and respectful. And if we have an issue, we address it in a professional and a respectful of all partners, not in the crazy foster parent. Because once you're labeled crazy foster parent, you won't ever get out from under the label. So don't do it. Don't do it. Make sure that you're completely calm before you send the email. You've run it by somebody else. Hey, do you think this is a good way to address this? But make sure every time you do that, because that goes a long way in your reputation, in your ability to help the kids further down the road, Place of Hope's reputation, in as we represent God to people, so it goes a long way. Of course, we want excellent parenting. We're treating our kids the way, regardless if they're our foster kids or if our kids are living there with us, our birth kids, but all children get the same care and excellent parenting. We're helping kids connect to a culture that they are already connected to. We continue to do trainings every year. We don't disrupt children out of our home, but we are hang in there and parent them through tough stuff, which you guys probably no one will do that better than you, because you know all about how that looks. Helping them transition smoothly out of our home is so important. We would always, with our kids, when it was time for them to go back home, or if they were going with grandma or wherever their transition is, we would celebrate that. So we would throw a party just to celebrate the time that they were with us, take pictures, write a card, make a CD of photo memories, whatever it is, to celebrate the time that they were there and help them with that transition. If it's a younger children, we're sending all the little things they love with them. They're writing out a schedule for whoever the caregiver is. This is the schedule they're typically on. They may or may not honor that, but at least we're communicating as much as we can to help for a smooth transition for the child, rather than allowing our emotions be in control. Maybe we're super sad. Maybe we disagree with it. Whatever it is, that's secondary to our primary goal of making this as smooth for the child as possible, because we are the capable, strong adults who have lots of resources to help us grieve and help us process and help us deal with our emotions, but the children have us to help them through that transition. And so that's so important that is always our priority. Okay. Of course, where a child goes, I think you guys know that they typically are staying unless they go back home or move to a relative or to an adoptive home potentially. There's a case plan that is the legal document that details exactly what services the child needs or has, their living arrangements, and then also includes the tasks that the parents need to complete in order for reunification to happen. So if their parents need 5 clean drug screens and a parenting class and a house and a job, all that's going to be listed in the case plan, and then they have to substantially comply with what the case plan requirements are in order for reunification to happen. So the team doesn't sit around and be like, okay, do we think this is a good idea to reunify the child now or not? No, they don't do that. They look at the list of things in the case plan that they came up with for them to do and say, did they substantially comply with this list or did they not? There's no common sense necessary, which is good and very bad at the same time. But it's very much based on the case plan, because that's the legal document that was established in the beginning that's going to determine what happens down the road. So that's important, because we can be tempted to think, how can they think this is a good idea? They may not think it's a good idea. But if the parent has substantially complied with the list that you gave them 2 years ago, then that's the foundation for reunification. Okay, so that's super important to understand. Case management is who you go to for any legal decisions that need to be made, any legal paperwork, and of course your case worker is going to help you with that, but they're the ones making all the legal decisions. We don't do that. Place of Hope does not do that for the child. We're responsible for the care of the child. Okay, so if they have visits, that's a whole thing too, where we're helping the child prepare for the visits. Consistency surrounding visitation, like when they return, is really the thing that has helped my kids the most. They know when they come back to, Mama Jenny's house, we always go to Chick-fil-A for dinner that night, or we always, read a book together. There's something that is really clear in their mind what happens on visit days. Well, you're going to go visit Mommy Susie, and then you're going to come back to Mommy Jenny's house, and we're going to read that favorite book together. So because whatever we do, we want to eliminate the fear. And there's tons of behaviors that usually surround visitation, regardless of their age, because it takes them out of their normal environment. It brings a lot of fear of, well, what's going to happen? What does this mean? What did they say? What didn't they say? How did that make them feel to see their mom? All of that usually comes out at us upon returning back home. So if we're as proactive as we can be in making it a super consistent environment where they have an opportunity to calm down, to feel safe as quickly as possible, that gets them back into the routine that we have for them. Of course, what they need for a visit, all of that is, you can do that. But page 21 talks about a child's attachment to the foster parent is so important. So of course, babies are wired to attach. They do that very naturally as a mom responds and feeds her child every time she's hungry. She picks the baby up and lovingly feeds and meets their needs. And then every time we go around the cycle of need, there's a need, the baby displays the need, we respond to the need, the baby relaxes, trust is developed. So every time we go around the cycle of need, trust is developed. If the cycle of need is interrupted, mistrust develops rather than trust. You guys know all this. I know that. So for the recording, this is what happens. But regardless of the age, we want to build that cycle of need. So we want our kids to meet their needs regardless of how old they are. Maybe they're 4 and we're still spoon feeding them because we want the eye to eye. We want to be able to lovingly meet their need so that they can learn that we love them, that they can trust us, that when we're hungry, we feed them. All of those things help them trust us. So it's a way bigger picture than we can see just in that moment. But we know trust is foundational to attachment. So we work on those things together, and we do that intentionally through physical contact, eye-to-eye contact, smiling. You guys know the smiling more than we're frowning. So it's very tempting because of negative behaviors to have the angry face, but we want our kids to have a loving eye-to-eye and smiling relationship as much as humanly possible, while still instilling, consequences and training and all of that. But attachment, I love this quote on 21. Attachment's considered the vital component of social and emotional development in the early years. Individual differences in the quality of attachment relationships are believed to be important early indicators of mental health. So, later mental health is very indicative on that early attachment of the child with their caregivers. And whatever age our kids come to us, it's important that we either identify, did they come from a place of an attached relationship? If so, they probably have that trust broken, which hurts, which makes them afraid of reattaching. But as time goes on and they build that relationship and trust with us, that kind of it happens. But it's the kids that it's not happening that we know maybe they never developed it, because if they never developed it, they don't know how to do it. They don't have the ability to do it. So it's those kids that we're loving and we're meeting their needs and we're doing all the right stuff to develop attachment to them. But as time goes on, we recognize they still don't care, and you guys know this. I had boys that I'm positive someone could have come in and murdered me in front of him and he would not have cared. Wouldn't have cared. Didn't care. Okay, so that tells me that this child has attachment issues. He didn't just have a broken attachment that needs reattached. He never developed the capacity or the understanding of how to have an attached relationship. And so, yes, oftentimes that's a reactive attachment disorder or a RAD diagnosis, which requires a specialized RAD therapy. And even then, it's not just a quick fix. It's just what that child needs and is struggling with is very different than a broken attachment. So we become experts on, self-proclaimed experts on what was their attachment history, because that helps us know how to parent them, right? So are we parenting them from the perspective of just a little time and patience and they're going to come around and they're going to build that trust with us, or from they need to learn like they're a newborn how to trust and attach to someone as a skill. So you guys already know that, but that concept alone is kind of foreign to a lot of people, because we just don't think in terms of, you learn to attach and some people didn't do it. That concept is really important to understand. So that's an area I would say read more books about, really understand how trauma, foster care, all of those things affect the attachment ability of a child, because you are going to deal with kids from both of those ends of the spectrum, and they need you to be knowledgeable enough to know what they need in order to help them meet those needs. Okay. Whew. I used up my whole hour and we're not done, but we can go faster. It's cool. All All right, so page 37 is the quiz. Co-parenting means to reach out on some level and work in cooperation with the birth parents. That's true. So we are co-parenting with the birth parents on some level. Maybe we never even meet them. We're still co-parenting. Maybe we work right through a reunification and we have their phone number and we drop them off for weekend visits. We're co-parenting on some level, whether it's a note on a visit, whether it's no visits. As long as that child belongs to them, there's co-parenting happening. As a foster parent, it's not necessary for you to attend court or other staffing. The case manager will tell you what you need to know. It's helpful for you to go or for your representative to go rather than trusting case management. Babies and young children do not need to emotionally attach to their foster parents. Of course, that's false. They need to desperately. If you hold an infant too often or respond to their needs too quickly, you'll spoil the child. False. You should respond to the child. You know, I've seen foster parents like, oh, the baby's 6 months and they're so good. They're just so happy and they're swinging all day. No, they're not. That's not a good baby. That's a hurting baby. A 6-month-old should see you and cry because they want you to pick them up. That's a good baby. So, you know, making sure we don't fall into that quiet means good. Quiet does not mean good. Okay. So make sure they're doing what a normal child of that age should do, or it's indicative that there is a need, or before you even figure it out, you just carry them around and attach to them. Research suggests that parental involvement is linked to quicker reunification and other forms of permanency. That's true. So the more involved we are, the better the case and quicker the case will go. The next chapter talks all about normalcy, which this just means getting the kids, and Place of Hope does an excellent job of that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but they really help you get the teenagers into normal environments, sports, church, all kinds of stuff. I mean, the opportunities for the kids there are just tremendous. It will not be an issue at all. But the issue is that, of course, in our day-to-day life with them, we're teaching them the skills that they need, those independent living skills, how to do laundry, how to cook, how to shop at Publix, how to do all the things that they may not have learned yet. That's where that falls on us, is those practical day-to-day hygiene. That's important. Hey, guys, you know, I would do this. Every kid that moved in, hey guys, this is how you take a shower. You take your washcloth, you put this much soap on, you start here, you end here. Like, we would literally walk them through that. Toilet paper actually goes into the toilet, guys. You know, all the things we walk them through, because I just assume that you know nothing, and so I'm going to teach it all to you. This is how we wash dishes. This is how we sweep the floor. This is how we make a bed. This is how we clean a closet, everything. Okay, so I have no expectations until I have actually taught you how to do something, right? So I don't just say, clean your room. I show you how to clean your room. I don't say, don't use bad words. I tell you which words you're not allowed to use, you know, so it's just a very different environment. But we want them to have a normal childhood, be involved in all that stuff, but also teach them all those little daily skills that they need. Okay, so then the next chapter is behaviors, managing behaviors. When we see behaviors as an expression of what they need, that helps us to be better trauma-sensitive parents, right? So behaviors are not just help us know if it's a good kid or a bad kid, but behaviors help us. What do they need? Do they need to work on self-control? Do they need to work on attachment? Do they need to work on anger management? What is it that their behaviors are telling us they need to work on? So page 6, is it normal for a child of that age? Is there a medical reason they're doing it? Does it link to trauma? Is it a growth or developmental stage? Is it a temperamental difference? You've got the strong-willed and the easygoing kids. So the same thing may look very different depending on the kid. Is there something in the environment in my home that's causing this behavior? Does the child clearly know what's expected? And is the child expressing an unmet emotional need? So all of those are questions that we're asking ourselves before we're just throwing out consequences. Hey, where's this coming from? Is this something trauma sensitive, trauma linked that I can meet? Or is it just a childish behavior that we're going to patiently train through? So we're constantly assessing that. Is it foolishness? Or is it childishness? You know, Travis and I constantly would do that, because if it's childishness, they're children. They're going to be childish, right? Is it foolishness? The foolishness is what we need to work on. You know, the refusing to follow directions, the unkindness to others, you know, all of the things that need to be worked on, we work on. Leaving your bike out in the rain, forgetting to do your chore, that's childishness. You know, so we handle those two behaviors very differently because they are different. Recognizing on page 7 that our kids go through grief. Okay, so just like when we lose something or someone, it initiates a grief cycle in our life. It happens to our kids too. So if we talked about something we lost, we could easily see how we go into shock and denial. I can't believe this is even real. anger. Maybe we're angry at God. Maybe we're angry at the hospital. Maybe we're angry at DCF, so there's anger, there's the bargaining. If only my parents had fed me, I'd never have to be in foster care. I heard that from two of my brothers one time. If only I had obeyed better, I would have never had to be in foster care. I've heard that one, so there's that if only. Then despair, depression, where they just aren't their normal selves. And then hopefully they get to that understanding place where I understand why this happened. It's not fair. I don't like it, but I understand it. And that helps me to be able to move out of the grieving cycle and towards healing. But we have to see our kids as in that grieving cycle, just like we would be sensitive to our friends. If their mom just died and we were walking them with them through that, there are behaviors that our friend would display that we would be very understanding of, right? A short word or an angry gesture or whatever, we would be very understanding of that. But sometimes with our kids, we don't have that same level of patience and understanding. But when we see their behaviors as grieving behaviors, if they are, then that helps us show compassion and patience towards them and their behaviors when we recognize that they are somewhere in that grieving cycle. The next couple pages talk about attachment that we already covered. So then we're talking about managing kids' behaviors. Page 12 talks about the policy, which I'm sure you guys are going to go through this in other trainings, but of course you cannot use any type of corporal or physical punishment. You cannot withhold meals, clothing, or shelter. Of course, not allowing the children to be subjected to any verbal abuse, derogatory remarks. You cannot use any constraining, locked, poorly lit, or poorly ventilated rooms for timeout. And if separation is happening, you have to go check on them every so long. And if it's a young child, timeout should happen actually in your presence and not away from your oversight. Of course, we don't subject them to any cruel, severe, humiliating, or unusual punishment or interference with the case plan, denying them contact or visits, or using physical exercise that's excessive or may endanger their health. Or we don't punish them for bedwetting or potty training issues. Okay, so all of that is actually Florida's policy, which we all are bound to follow with our foster children. What we do is come up with a very intentional plan of managing their behaviors. I know for us, we use charts, and charts were so helpful for us. I don't know if they've shown you any of what they still use there, but we would actually make a chart that listed the privileges that they enjoyed in our home. And then they had all those privileges unless they didn't follow one of the 3 rules. We had 3 rules, which were follow directions immediately, treat others with kindness and respect, and do your chore every day. Okay, so only 3, which, everything in the world falls under those, but still only 3. And if they didn't follow one of those 3 rules, they would lose a privilege when our boys were teenagers for the week. When they're younger, it's more on a day-to-day basis. And when they're very young, under 5, of course, it's an immediate basis. You can't give a consequence that's not immediate or it's not effective, right? So a very young child needs an immediate consequence. As they get a little bit older, developmentally, not chronologically, of course, they can see into the day. They know what after school means, that we don't get to ride my skateboard after school has meaning and understanding. We can use that as a day. Then when you're a teenager, if developmentally you're there, you should be able to see into the week. I can't play video games all week. That would make sense to you, so we use that. So they follow the 3 rules. They have all these privileges. If they break one of the 3 rules, we would actually put a little mark through the first privilege listed there, and we would write, did not obey when I told you to go to bed. Did not turn off the TV when I told you to turn off the TV. Did not do your chore today. Whatever it is, we would write that. And then 3 days later, hey, can I play video games? Well, let's check your chart. Oh, look, buddy, you didn't, do your chore on Monday. So you actually don't have video games this week. But next week, I know you can just remember to do that or do it immediately when I ask you or whatever. So it removes all the emotion on our part. I'm not upset. I'm never upset. I have no reason to get upset. Here's what I need you to do in our home. It's very clear. Either you do it or you don't do it. You do it, you enjoy this. You don't do it, you don't enjoy this. You choose. It doesn't upset me ever because it's a choice that you make and then you live with. So it really helped us to not, there's no emotional conversations. There's definitely conversations when we're calm about, hey, how could you better handle it when your brother annoys you, and not use, not treat him so disrespectfully when you guys are disagreeing. So there's definitely all of that. And we would actually do trainings whenever there was a conflict. We would call the 2 kids or however many are involved into the office later once everyone was calm, and we would role play the exact same scenario, but tell them exactly, hey, this is what you should have said. You should have said, please ask me before you borrow my socks. That's stupid. I'm not doing that. And be like, okay, we'll wait. And you have all day. It's what you do. So you wait, and then until he's like, okay, fine. You should have asked me to borrow my socks. Good. That's what you should have said. Now, if you would have said that, that would have diffused the situation. No one needed to punch each other. No one needed to threaten to kill each other. No one needed to, take out their belt and say you're going to strangle him. All of that stuff's actually against the law. That's not appropriate. We don't do that. So we would walk through all of that in a very calm, role-playing way, because to me, that's training up a child in the way they should go. They didn't see that. They didn't have much modeling. They've only been here a couple months. So we're role-playing it because that's how I trained them on how they could have responded. And I saw the fruits of that many years later, but I did, and it's super helpful. But the charts are super helpful. Natural consequences can be used. You get kicked off the bus. This one happens all the time too, which means I have to drive you. So we're going to take $3 out of your weekly allowance because I already paid for you to ride the bus with my tax dollars. Now I have to put gas in my van to take you. So you can cover my gas if you can't ride the bus. So, just a logical or natural consequence for older children. Of course, that doesn't work with young kids because they have no concept of money or future or taxes. Obviously it has to be something they understand. But that can be helpful. Or choices is another behavioral thing that we use to diffuse a lot of things before they even became an issue. Do you want to do your homework right when you get home or after you ride your bike for an hour? I'm good either way. You choose. So then it's not go do your homework. It's, hey, which one do you want to do your homework right away or after you go outside and play for an hour? And if they can manage that choice, then they can make that choice. Do you want to wear the blue shirt or the red shirt? I don't have to determine every little thing, especially for kids who've had no control. They fight for control over everything. So if I give them a couple of choices, both of which are pleasing to me, but let them feel like they have some control, that can be super helpful in them feeling like they have some control in our home. All right, so the quiz says, behaviors are often the expression of an unmet emotional need. That one I would say sometimes, because kids are kids and they just have positive and negative behaviors due to being children. But sometimes they're an expression of an unmet emotional need, but they do communicate to us. It's okay to spank your foster child as long as you don't leave a mark. That's false. You cannot spank your foster child. Telling your foster child you'll request the removal from your home if they don't behave is an effective method of behavior management. That's false, okay? Children should be punished for wetting the bed. They should know better, probably do it on purpose. That's also false, okay? If you do have a bedwetter, which you probably at some point will, we manage that by, of course, we always have plastic on all the bedding. But we had our teenager who had bedwetting washed, he just got up, took his sheets, he washed them himself. Of course, you try all the typical bedwetting stuff for the younger kids, pull-ups, don't drink at night, all of that. But sometimes it's emotional and it's not physical. So until he got to an emotional healing point, then he could not manage his bedwetting. So we just kind of embraced the bedwetting, if that's how you want to say it, because it was just going to happen until he got far enough along emotionally. So we didn't talk about it in front of the other kids. It was just our routine. He got up, he washed his sheets, I put him in the dryer, put him back on his bed, and that was just our daily routine. Every day we just washed the linens. So loss of privileges, grounding, redirecting a child's activity, or reinforcing acceptable behavior are good methods of behavior management. So of course, yes, having things that they can earn is always good. We would have incentives, like weekly incentives. So at the end of every week, each kid chose something that was meaningful to them, that if they didn't have any marks on their chart, either at school or at home or one or the other, or however we thought best motivated that child, then they chose a reward. So one kid, we never drank soda, ever. So one kid chose like a thing of soda. So on Friday, he had a good week, that's what he earned. Another one wanted artsy comic books. So we just got a stack of whatever we thought would incentivize them, and they worked towards that on a weekly basis. They knew at the end of every week they had that, and that was really helpful because it was something visual and it was something they could work towards, rather than just always, oh, you lost that, which is necessary, but it's also fun to be able to work towards a goal of something that you want that is not a normal thing for you. Okay, so psychotropic medications, I think you guys will do that somewhere else. Then you've got lots of developmental work, stuff and positive parenting for all those developmental ages. Then we do a whole chapter on childhood sexual abuse, which is a big issue for kids in foster care. They say as many as 70 to 80% of children who touch the foster care system will experience some type of sexual abuse. But there's a whole training on that probably you will do with Laura. So I'm not going to go into all of that. I'll let her cover all of that for that. And then the last one is, the last chapter is transitions. So helping the kid again transition out, remembering that the things that they struggle with, we can come back to what we started with. They have trouble trusting others, managing their behaviors, feeling safe, understanding their emotions, physically adapting to stress. Those are the things that we are focused on. Those are the things we have an intentional plan to meet. And I love the quote on page 4 in chapter 7. Foster children do not come into our home to fill a void in our lives, but rather we fill a void in theirs. This helps us keep a healthy perspective and is a constant reminder as to why we were foster parents. So they are definitely not there to meet any type of need or desire that we have. Our mission is simply to fill the void that they need in this season. And as a foster parent, I would say that fostering was a blessing more so down the road than it was in the middle of it. Because a lot of times when you're in the middle of something, you guys know, challenging, it's harder to see the blessings. It's harder to see the good stuff. But now as I look back, I see God using it in so many ways. But when I was in it, just so you don't feel weird, I felt like it was harder, the hardest thing I'd ever done, harder than I expected, more frustrating than I expected, because I expected change and I didn't see change for many years of doing the same thing without seeing much change. And that was frustrating. It made me feel like what I was doing didn't matter. But when you look back in hindsight, you see all the little moments and all the little things that happened. And just this couple days ago, one of our previous foster children from when we were house parents, he came over with his girlfriend and he has some life stuff that he was talking about, but he moved into our home the day after he turned 8. He's 25 now. Okay. And he's, his girlfriend said to me, Nate said we just needed to come and talk to you because you had a way with words and your words would make everything make sense. And, to me, it was really probably the greatest compliment that I've ever gotten, because in all those days when all the words you will say, and you think no one's listening, and you think they don't matter, and you think that what am I doing? I have nothing to show for these years of my life. 15 years later, a little boy who was hurting and scared remembered that my words brought life into his hurt. And I didn't know it until a couple of days ago. He never acted like it, but they did. And that's the reason why, we're foster parents. That's the reason I know you guys are about to enter this journey. But don't give up when it gets hard, because when it gets hard is the real time it makes a difference, and where the words that you think don't matter will matter. And you guys, your journey has been long enough and challenging enough that you already know that, but we still need to remind each other that we do it for the glory of God, and because he tells us to care for the least of these, and it truly is the least of these that we do this work for. And so thank you for doing it. Don't be surprised by anything. Nothing surprises you. Stay calm in all circumstances. Have a plan. Be proactive. Be kind. Be compassionate. Be understanding. Be educated as much as you possibly can. And then allow God to do what he does. He redeems. It takes him longer than I wish it did, but he redeems. All right? You guys are going to be awesome. Do you have any questions?
I marked a couple things.